All right, legends. Scoop is in. No mic for me today. Hopefully, it still sounds pretty good. I'm in Sydney off to Gold Coast tomorrow morning, which could be fun. But in this one, guys, Scoop just brought up the topic. You wanted to talk about some of the potential buys heading into this week that we are looking at. And he spent half the afternoon thinking about Kieran Foran. So he just wanted to speak about, how do we know if any of these guys are a mirage or not? Like, are they actually going to make money? Maybe they haven't been really fantasy relevant before. So take it away, Scoop, and talk us through a couple of these guys and maybe a bit of your sort of criteria that you're going to look at to select them.
Yeah, well, last round was a nice, refreshing change from 600 and 700 points. We finally got some points in the board, but
Yeah.
there were some guys who scored really well and caught our eyes as a result that have kind of not really done it before. But there are potential roles opening up for them, but there's uncertainty over them. So if you've got a player that generally has never really been fantasy relevant and then out of nowhere kind of does one or two things good, you just ignore them. Like it's just they've had two or three good weeks and then they disappear. I think like a lot of new people buy Kick Out because he's like big name. Oh, he's had two games, he scored a 60 and a 70 in back-to-back weeks. Then he goes back to 30s because we know that's what Kick Out does. So there's a couple of players like that floating around at the moment. Even Kickout himself, he's looking really dangerous. Do you jump on and think, wow, he's consistent, he's cheap now? Do you go for him? It's a real point of consideration. So yeah, the two I probably most want to talk about regarding that, we'll touch on maybe one or two more quickly. Corey Waddell and Kieran Foran.
Yeah, Foran
So
first.
yeah, so if we dive into these stats, you just scroll down a bit. It just as far as you like. He's at 5'8". He does a little bit of tackling, not much running, and not much kicking. And you can see the lovely scores of 10, 20, 30, and occasionally 40. Like it's not pretty. Foreign has never really been a guy you've wanted to own for fantasy. He's popped up to 500k maybe a couple of times in his career since the early 2010s. But
It's
if
a
you
long
scroll
scroll
back up
down,
to
isn't it?
last week's game, all of a sudden he had an interesting role. He suddenly had 661 kick meters because he was the main controlling half. Brimson wasn't kicking, Randall wasn't kicking, Campbell wasn't kicking, and now Sammy, who's replacing him at fullback, doesn't kick. So he was getting a lot of kick meters. And like Fogarty, all of a sudden his base has gone through the roof astronomically. If you've got 660 kick meters, that's 22 points compared to 7, 8, 9 before. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden it's like, wow, there's maybe 5 to 10 points of value just based on that. So that's a lot of rambling, but Kieran Foran is somebody who's never been relevant, but now we've got to sit down and think, okay, is this a one-off or is this something we can actually chase? So let's break down what's actually going on there. So the Titans have lost a lot to begin the year, right? They finally shook things up. They wanted to try something new. That would indicate maybe Foran's got this role because they wanted to try a different role. They wanted to do something different to what they were doing. That's a plus. However, they still lost, and there's no guarantee that with their season floating down the drain, they don't change it in another week or two. So
Yeah.
like they might move Brimson to fullback now that Campbell's out in a week and bring Boyd back in, and then Foran's gone. Foran's dead. He has trapped us all.
Yep.
That's a legitimate option. And it's really difficult to know what happens. So I think Foreign is a consideration that you need to think about, but you need to know the risks if you're going to hop on. Because at his price of about 400, if he knocks out some 40s and 45s, he'll make you 100k real quick. But he needs to stay there for probably close to a month or more in order to make that value. And you need to factor into consideration, do you think the Titans looked better last week? Is there a chance that it stays like that? Or are we just going to get Kieran Foran like he scored for the last 12 years, sort of a thing?
Feels like a big risk either way, doesn't it? Like,
Mm,
suppose with every one of those stats is a massive outlier. Like I was having a look at his try assists today, and he had a two try assists at the back end of last year, and then I had to scroll for a long time before I could find the next two try assist game in round 15.
2021.
in 2021. That tackle number of 37, the kick meters number, these are all career highs. Yeah, even missed tackle numbers. Like he had 5 and 4 in the first couple of games for him, and it's just absolutely wild how he ended up scoring. But I suppose if you take a lot of that away, is 40 enough, right? And then obviously the question you said is like, do they change that in the next couple of weeks? And Boyd comes back and takes that role again. So yeah, I suppose if everything goes right, he could hit like a 45 average, right? Is that probably what you think if everything's
Yeah.
perfect? Yeah.
Yeah, well, if he's the dominant playmaker, a little bit like Fogarty, he takes on more responsibility, has more of those creative opportunities, but he needs to keep it. There's narrative that Boyd might come back in because of injury. There's a narrative that it's going to take a bit of time for Boyd to come back in because they gave him so long, and then now they've finally got rid of him. They want to try something different. You've got to factor in which one you think it's going to be before you press that nice shiny trade button, because we don't have too many because we've used so many to start the year. So Foreign is somebody who could make a quick buck, and we're like, "Oh, why didn't we jump on? It was so obvious." Well, hindsight, maybe it was, maybe it will be, maybe it won't be, but we don't know at this stage. We've got to weigh up: is that going to be something that can happen, or is it just way too out of the ordinary? It is very out of the ordinary. There are one or two things to suggest it might continue for a bit, but how much weighs against it? That's, I think, the summary of Foreign.
Yeah, it's a full-on one, that's for sure. Corey Waddell's next, mate. He's a little bit more on my radar than that of Kieran Foran. I still haven't made up my trades yet. I think Waddell's the guy if I go for 2 trades, and if I go for 3, I think I may be sacrificing Waddell for potentially Xavier Willison. I do think there's still some value there, and he looks better and better every week. But Waddell at 425, it does seem like a bit of a slam dunk pick, but there's a lot of factors to this as well, isn't there? With does Burbo come back in a month and take that spot back? And yeah, I suppose like obviously he's missed tackle numbers. There's a lot to do with it, right? And he's very, very volatile in terms of his scoring, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. If you filter the second row 60, 70 minutes, he pops out at over a 40 average, which is good. There are a few tries in there, which not probably something you want to see when you're looking for solid value that you can rely on as a forward. But he looks to have that role for at least a while Burbo's out. And as soon as we get good confirmation on how long it's going to be, because it's sort of floating around about 3 weeks, something like that, isn't it, at the moment?
It's a grade 1, but I suppose the thing with Burbo is the fact that he had 3 hamstring injuries last year, and
3 on the
I'd
same
say
leg.
they'll take it pretty comfortably with him, that it won't be like a quick return. That's for sure. I'm personally not worried about that side of it. I suppose it's probably just the volatility, and does he actually get the 80 as well? They're probably the questions for me.
Yeah, well, you've got Lawton and Bullimore on the bench. You could potentially take a few minutes away from him. I'm not too worried. I think there's a chance, but I don't think it's as crazy high as some people think, because Bullimore's being more and more shaped into a middle, and Lawton's basically just being the Croker spell.
Yeah.
He's been coming on for Croker and doing that, but both of them can play edge if they need to. So if he's having a shocker and gets hooked 53 minutes in, like Burbo started to get after a couple of weeks, that could be Waddell done and dusted, and he's only made you 50, 60K. But
Yeah.
there is more solid evidence for Waddell staying in a good role, at least for that while, and having some good value. So if he averages, I think about 40 it is for 3 weeks, he makes just under 100, and then
Mhm.
trickles over to whatever he does, even if he loses the role. And if he scores, say, 45 for the next 3 weeks, he makes about 110, 115, something around like that. And then there's also the other factor which was brought up to me, which is Origin's not super far away around the corner, and there's a very, very solid chance Jake Travojevic and Olakawatu especially could be missing. But they'll go straight back in for another week there. So I don't guarantee that it's has to happen, especially because it'd be mostly on the backing up side, because Manly have that buy in round 13. But there are other factors that might help Waddell out, especially with Burbo not doing amazing the last few weeks and Waddell doing pretty decent. Maybe he keeps it until Origin.
Yeah. And it does feel like to me that he's a guy that you probably take for the next month or so. And then it's a
Mm.
good chance you sell him then. So it's like, is he a guy you want to do that? And I suppose if that's the case, then you do need him to score pretty well and make some good money for that to be the kind of the play. But is that sort of, I don't know, is that a situation that's pretty viable at the moment where you're just looking to get another, cash cow in that can score okay, but you need to then sell him out when I suppose when he gets around 7, 8, 9, you're probably hoping to buy a mid-ranger that you can hold through the buy period or at least until like around 16, 17, right?
Yeah, I do agree. I think the time is coming to get another good mid in because at this stage of the season we're generally starting to creep up in the cash and upgrading a lot of our guys. Where a lot of us are still getting rid of some duds, but guys like Sam Hughes, Salmon, Flanagan in 2 or 3 weeks, they'll have peaked and you want to move them on. You'll want somebody like I've seen people tossing up like Tohu Harris, Britton Nickera, guys in that sort of price bracket and scoring bracket that you want to bring into your team. I don't think Waddell is the guy who you want to hold through that period, but he does look like a solid scorer in the meantime that you can take up until that time and maybe flick him to one of those guys in round 13.
Yeah. Do you think there's anyone this week that is a slam dunk outside of probably Gus?
Uh, I'd say I'd say he's the top. If you don't have Iro, he's close, maybe. Like Finucane's still somewhere. I don't know where he is,
He's another
but
week or two.
it's
Yeah, still.
better. Yeah. So Iro and Angus are good. I've seen a lot of debate over whether if you have neither, whether Curran or Hypeus Paul is the one to go for.
Yep.
Um, or whether it's too late for both and things like that. And I have seen Waddell tossed up quite a lot. So, especially given our dire mid situation to begin the year, I think Waddell's not a bad option to bring in, um, given that he'll make at least some good money for a while, and then you can probably move him on either at Origin or just before.
Yeah, definitely. Mate, let's have a little quick look at your squad. Well, here you beat me by 6, I believe, in the end. That I think you were up by 1, and then Harry Grant went up by 5, which doubled for you, which was lovely. That was a good little surprise for you, wasn't it, on Monday morning?
Yeah, it was good. I was annoyed at some of the downgrades. Like Kai Pierce Paul went from 75 to 70 to 66, and it's like,
That's right.
oh. But yeah, there were some good scores this week finally. I think the main thing that pulled me down was just having Hutchison in my 17
Yeah.
prevented me from having a real solid week. The rest of everything turned out okay, except I ended up playing Levi, hoping he'd go over against the Titans yet again over Ben
Against me.
Trbojevic, which, I mean, looping at 29, you can't lose out too many points. There's only
Yeah,
about 10, so not too
that's
bad.
right. Yeah, well, I suppose you did really well, mate, having obviously Fogs with the 82, getting on Crichton and Iro was really nice for you. So a good little break went your way. And then Flanagan's 43 was pretty cool too. So
Mm.
good bunch of scores there. And does that mean you're pretty well set for, 0, 1 or 2 trades, Max?
Uh, I want to, but I've
Sitting
also
there
got
looking at four
Hutchison,
and
who's now losing money, and the Bulldogs buyers coming up, and I just don't like having him in my team at this point.
you got
Levi, who's
four,
now
don't you?
peaked,
Yeah.
and Raiders buy coming up. Berber, who's injured, Tulagi, who's there. So I do still have a bit of work to do.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to use, I'm probably going to use at least two, and then figure out whether I want to go Levi to Chevy as a third or just sit on that for a bit.
And obviously Cleary News has been pretty annoying for you having being a holder.
Yeah, it is
Expecting
pretty
him back
annoying.
next
It's
week and hoping.
yeah, has to be back next week. And if you're holding like I think you still just have to hold because it's like almost certainly 1 week away, you'd think. I
Yeah.
just hope they're not doing a Latrell Mitchell from last year where he's like back next week, back
Oh,
next week. It was like 12 weeks or something stupid. Or
yeah.
Zach Tungo. Where is he back? Is he back? Nobody knows. But
A
yeah,
2 week
so I
injury for
think
Latrell. That was
yeah,
crazy.
it did end up being a bad hold. I went for the 1 week, possibly risking it so that it might be three, and it's ended up being four, which you don't want $1 million on your bench for a month. So I have definitely lost points there. But
Yeah,
hopefully next week he drops 110 bomb and I
that's
can
right.
catch up a couple of ranks.
Makes him up for you, that's for sure. Yeah, I suppose that's the big thing this week, hey, is it's a situation where like if we're trading in guys now, for well, let's say the Levi's and the Hutchisons, right? These guys are scoring, anywhere from 20s, 18 and 19 apparently, but usually 20s. That was Hutchison's lowest score by a long way, to 30s, right? Not scores we really want in our 17. So do you think it's an opportunity this week? Yes, if you are still, you've max traded the whole time. You now use another 3 trades, but you're removing some of these 15 to 30 odd players for guys that are probably going to be like 30 to 45 players. Do you think that's a worthy upgrade and kind of getting rid of that crap, even though you are sort of max trading again over this week and potentially next week too?
I think if you guys jump in the Discord, for those who are in ready, I've dropped a bit of a buy thingo early this year just because we've had so many trades used up. You need to start using them effectively. So yes, I think you can keep trading, but you need to stop soon. And the way you do that is to prepare for those first couple of weeks of that Origin period and pick players from the right teams to come in. So I'm happy to sell probably Hutchison, 2 out of the 3 of Hutchison, Burbo, and Levi, and see what happens with Talagi.
Okay.
And then if he sits and gets a 6 from the bench this week, then he's definitely gone. But yeah, it's not crazy. If Harper has a bad game, maybe he can go in. But yeah, so I'm happy to use a couple myself because I did end up saving 2 in round 1. But yeah, they're disappearing fast, guys. So if you are trading to get those points in, because we've had a rough start, make sure they're guys that you're going to have for a while or guys that work really, really well with your origin, the beginning of your origin calculations.
Definitely. Next week, mate, we've got sort of, well, you have 4. I have 4 as well, Bulldogs players. And then to have potentially a Talangi or something like that that's in a position where he might not score many points if we get an injury or something next week. Do you think that round 8 is the week that we can cop like a strong 16, or just like barely scrape together a 17? It feels like one of those weeks. Is it worth fighting to get that, use that extra trade or something to get that 17, or is it just a settle kind of week? It's a weird one, isn't it?
I think only if you can trade to a person who's good. If you're just making a trade for the sake of a trade that's sort of mostly there but not quite, don't do it.
Yeah.
And just make a proper good, valuable trade. Like, I wouldn't immediately rush out and get Stewart if he's still scoring 22, 23, 26, 30, and not going anywhere just to avoid copping 16. Because what's that? You might get a lucky captain and you've made up that 20, 25 points. So if it's a good trade that's definitely going to help your team, good. If it's not really perfect, I don't think it's as urgent.
Yeah. Chevy Stewart, mate, thoughts on him coming into this week?
Yeah, it's a funny one. He's Blake Taft too. He's all heart and not so many fantasy points, but 200 run meters is very encouraging. He was doing a lot. It just didn't translate to fantasy. So hopefully he can be a bit like Ethan Strange, have a couple of quiet ones as he finds his feet, and then really go on a bit of a tear and make his way up to sort of the 400 or above mark.
That's pretty fair. Trey Fuller, I kind of guessed. I thought he'd be around the 400K mark. He's 425 in the end. Is that too much?
For somebody that's a bit of an unknown and they have other options at fullback if they need, probably too much for me. Like, what if when's Herbie due back? It's not tons and tons of time. It's earlier than a hammer. So
It'll
if
be a
Herbie
few
comes
weeks.
back, he can just go to fullback as well, and then maybe he's
Yeah.
gone. So not something I'm in love with.
Nick Kareem at a fullback. I thought that might have been the way they played
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
I suppose they've been doing well in the halves, haven't they? Because Sean O'Sullivan's just fallen off the face of the map. Crazy, eh?
Yeah, well, if you bought him in draft as one of your 2 main halves, you'll be in trouble. But yeah, I think Nicarima, Milford, and Katoa are going to be those guys, especially Katoa and Nicarima. That's how they're going. Katoa's a young gun. He had a year to find his feet and is doing pretty well this year, making more money. But yeah, I think they'll keep Fuller at fullback. What a great name for a fullback.
Fuller back.
Until either Herbie's back or until Hammer's back. But yeah, at 400, he needs to get to high 500s to really be worth it. And I don't love jumping on that side unseen.
Yeah, we need to hit like 45 average. Edge position, mate. Interesting question here. There's 3 different price points. We've got Kai Paul at 650. We've got Britton Nickera at 620 odd, and then Sean Blaw at 560 odd. Who would you pick and why in order?
Oh, I want to say Nickera, but next week, not this week, because there's every chance he'll be about 600 flat next week, and then he'll average similarly or around Kai Pearce-Paul for a bit cheaper than what Kai Pearce-Paul is now.
Mm.
So for this week, probably just Kai Pearce-Paul, because I mean he when he goes over and scores a big try with a lot of tackle breaks because he's a big unit, he's gonna have some big scores in him. So I think the ceiling is pretty good for Kai Pearce-Paul. He might outscore Nicker a bit, and the price point isn't that different. Blore, I would have top of the bunch if Chan didn't move back onto the bench. There's a good chance he just plays middle, but it's not appealing for somebody that you want to have definitely getting 80 minutes to jump on and grab some really good cash.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So if you could only get one of the three for the next 2 months, it's still Kai Paul.
With their schedule as well, probably yes, Kai Pearce-Paul. The Knights are one of four teams to um, play 5 out of 6 Origin weeks.
Yeah.
Sorry, not Origin weeks, major and minor bye weeks. And I think there are only one of two teams to only have one bye in that whole round 13 to 20 period. So they'll be nice and useful.
Fair. If we're looking at mids, you've obviously got Willison, Waddell, Max Plath. That's another interesting one as well. And then Jamin Jolliffe. Any of those guys really stand out to you?
Yeah. Olaf can probably almost sit on the list with Foreigner and Waddell as the top end of the spectrum for expected role versus Mirage. So he's a bit more solid, definitely
Definitely.
than Foreigner. And yeah, with Tino versus without Tino, big increase in minutes, and I think there's a little bit of an increase in PPM too. So I'm probably pretty happy with projecting him at about a 50 average, and he's priced at what, 43. So if he can do a little bit better than that, you've got yourself a good value cut price keeper. So if you aren't worried about mids for round 13 and have a bunch already, I think he's pretty decent.
Yeah, that's cool, mate. Hines is probably the only real interesting one now because people are going, it's the Hines, Johnson, Brown discussion there between those three price points. Thoughts on where Hines at? Didn't look great to my eye. What do you think?
Yeah, I was coming into this year, I was worried about um, him losing some role with Trindle. Didn't happen much in the first 3 weeks. I think Trindle averaged about 14,
Yeah.
but it almost did look like some people have been saying it's like, oh, Trindle should be the game manager and Hines would be a really good 6. But we kind of saw that. Trindle kicked for more meters than Hines last week, which is alarm bells for his floor. His ceiling's still great. He can do tons when he's got the ball in his hands. But if he doesn't have the ball in his hand as much, it is a worry for what he will average this year. I still think he averages 60 plus. It's just where does he sit on that spectrum? And is he now necessarily that gap clear of everybody else like he and Cleary were last year?
Yeah, that's 70 odd before the buy. Drew me in, that's for sure, because he looked pretty normal then and he didn't look that great on the weekend at all. He's got like, I don't know, 4 tackle breaks for the whole season or something stupid as well. Like,
Crazy, eh? You'd expect
yeah.
more.
And no tries, 3 try assists. So yeah, it's a strange old world. And hopefully it just keeps going the 50, 70 odd, 50, 70 odd that he's doing. The Robson special from the start of last year, 40, 70 odd, 40, 70
Yeah, that was
odd.
good, hey?
Johnson, like very expensive now, but like he's killing it. And then I really like Dylan Brown. Like he looked better on the weekend. He's averaging 60 across the first 3 games and still got another month without Moses too.
I think Dylan Brown is a good one to bring in if you don't have an extra eel in your team. Like
Yeah. No Lussick
um
and stuff.
if you don't have more than like Lussick and Talangi, and you're like getting rid of Talangi, I think if you're trying to bring him in as a 30 eel, it's dangerous because he's another one who's going to come up with a buy in the not too far future. So
I know.
if you just bringing him in and there's not much else that's going to be away in that week, good. He averages 60 without Moses, and he's shown that. So good. good points, good value, and yeah, there's not a lot wrong with him. Johnson is a funny one because he's been awesome, but I think he's too expensive now, given his really poor buy schedule for head to head. Perfect. Literally the ideal head-to-head schedule, as I'm sure you probably mentioned in some of your head-to-head vids. Misses Origin weeks and last week of the year. Misses none for head-to-head. Zero matches. Perfect. For overall, it's terrible. If you're trying to have him as a final season gun, he's going to be in that round 27 carnage guaranteed.
Yeah, well, I suppose they all miss him anyway, and if they're in the finals, he'll be out. He'd be out that round 27 anyway, so it's probably not a massive deal. We only have like 7 players or something in the last round anyway, don't we? So
Oh, mate. Yeah, I think oh, yeah, I still was a bit annoyed about that because I lost possibly a top 100 ranking because what's his face Harrison Graham got belted and got 9 instead of like 40. But yeah.
really, was it just come down to that 30 points probably? Yeah, it would.
Yeah, it might have been more than that, but it was close. It was round 27 we saw last year after such a long season, because 27 rounds is a long season now for regular season. There was so many restings, it was more than we'd ever seen before. And fantasy, please give us a lot of players that week. And with this start to the season, I think we could get it again. We could
Oh,
get 10
especially
again.
well, yeah, the injuries and that, but especially how many trades we've all used.
Yeah, well, by the end of Origin, we might
We'll
be
be in
stuck on
trouble.
about, we might only have 1 or 2 extra other than the extra 8 they give us, and then we'll be really struggling for points in that end week. But yeah, going back to Sean Johnson, if for some reason you can get through that Origin period with Johnson, not needing him for round 13 so much, he's great. He looks like he's scoring really well, but he is expensive now, and you need him to score well in order for him to be a good purchase. So
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I think that'll wrap it up. Big thank you for jumping on, and obviously, yeah, everyone get into Discord and check out his little buy planner there. It just tells you what teams to target across every single week, which is really cool. And good luck to this week. Hey, we're due for another big one, Scoop, and another big rank change would be lovely for you.
1,000 plus for the first time. Let's go.
Yeah, wow. We haven't even got. I haven't even got. Well, we've got close to 900, 1,000. They're the
Yeah.
good old days, weren't they?
Uh, not quite 2021, but pretty good.
Yeah, God.